The call in the quiet room of the veterinary clinic, the phone rang sharply, breaking the silence of the morning. Dr. Sarah Lee, a dedicated veterinarian, was sitting working with a pile of medical records and documents arranged right on the desk. The faint smell of antiseptic in the air, mixed with the heating system running continuously, creating a warm space to fight against the early March chill. She was taking notes on the last details of a former patient when suddenly, the clinic phone rang. A sudden sense of unease entered her as she heard the tense voice on the other end of the line. Dr. Lee, we have a serious problem with Max. He was just adopted this morning, but we discovered strange injuries on the premises. You need to come in immediately to see his condition. Everything seems very serious. The woman on the other end was worried, quickly explaining the situation. Her words were like a punch to Sarah's heart. Max was a golden retriever mix that Sarah had checked out earlier, a few days before he was adopted. Max was a happy, healthy dog who was always cheerful when meeting strangers. She couldn't understand why something was wrong with him. Can you tell me more about Max's condition? Sarah tried to keep her voice calm, even though her mind was already starting to panic. Max was brought home this morning, but as soon as we checked him over, we found strange wounds on his skin. They weren't normal wounds. It looked like Max had been injured before, but we didn't notice it before. You need to come and see him right away, the woman said, her tone gentle, making Sarah more worried. Sarah couldn't wait any longer. She breathed out the call, glanced at her watch, and felt anxiety welling up inside her. She didn't understand why these signs hadn't been detected before Max was adopted. She remembered the last time she had checked Max, he had been perfectly healthy, showing no signs of anything unusual. But now, the warnings from the call had made her unable to stop thinking about what had happened to this dog. At this moment, Sarah was gripped by unease. She thought about all the dogs she had cared for, but none had made her feel as anxious as this. Max was a sweet, happy dog who didn't cause trouble for anyone. Sarah felt a vague sense of anxiety, and she decided to go to the shelter to check on the situation. As Sarah drove toward the shelter, thoughts of Max kept running through her mind. Something wasn't right. Max couldn't have been just a minor injury, but the love of a doctor. She began to wonder who had dealt with the money to this dog. The question haunted her, and she couldn't shake it off until she got there. Sarah's car sped down the empty road. Other cars were few and far between. Only the cold wind blowing through the car windows made her feel tense. She couldn't stop thinking about Max, and with each passing minute, her fear grew. What was happening to him? Max, the very friendly dog Sarah, arrived at the shelter where Max had spent his days before being adopted. Everything was the same, with rows of cages filled with barking dogs. However, today was not a normal day, and the tension in the air seemed to thicken as she walked through the cramped doors of the center. Paula, the shelter director, stood waiting at the front door. She was a middle-aged woman, her hair a little gray, but her eyes still shone with determination and strength. Surely she knew that today was not a normal day for her or for Max. "Hello, Sarah," Paula said, her voice trembling, unable to hide her anxiety. "Thank you for coming so quickly." "Max is still in the back room." Sarah nodded, following Paula down the familiar hallway. The dogs in the kennels continued to bark in greeting, but as they passed, the barking died down as if they realized that something was different today. They seemed to sense the anxiety in the air. Sarah felt her heart pounding as they headed toward the last room in the back, where Max was kept. Paula opened the door and pointed to the small room. Max was huddled in the corner, his large eyes staring at them. The friendly, energetic dog Sarah had known looked different now. Max's golden fur was no longer as smooth as it had been, but had become matted and dull, seemingly losing its former luster. His frame was smaller, and his once happy tail was now curled under his body, no longer wagging happily. Max looked at Sarah, his eyes still familiar, but also fearful and wary. He backed away a little, his gaze never leaving Sarah. Dogs were very sensitive to human emotions, and even though he couldn't say it, Sarah understood. Max didn't recognize her, didn't feel the safety and familiarity she once brought him. "Max," Sarah called softly, crouching down to be within his line of sight. "Do you still remember me?" Max just looked at her with deep eyes, but there was no reaction. Not a tail wag, not the hasty kisses he used to give her every time they met. There was no sign of joy or happiness that Max used to show when he saw his old friend. The sight made Sarah feel her heart clench. She gently moved closer, sitting down next to Max and reaching out her hand so that he could come closer freely if he wanted to. Less than a minute had passed. Max suddenly shivered and then made an unexpected move. The dog sighed, and slowly, a small tail shook a little, but then retracted as soon as he felt the approach too close. Max seemed torn between wanting to go back to Sarah and feeling uncontrollable fear. Sarah stroked Max's head carefully, letting him get used to the warmth of her hands. She knew it wasn't going to be easy. Max had been a happy dog, always happy to meet anyone, but now he was a creature of doubt and fear. Max had experienced something very painful, a fear that had made him retreat into a shell of loneliness. This wasn't the Max Sarah knew. She looked closely at Max's body from head to toe, and what she saw made her shiver. Max's skin was covered in small burns, not accidental wounds. They were clearly signs of intentional abuse. Each burn was a whisper from the past, a painful past that Max had endured. "That's not it, Max. I'll help you," Sarah whispered, her hands running over the wound. Paula stood beside him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't understand, Sarah. Max has been here for so long. Why didn't we notice these injuries sooner?" she asked, her voice filled with sadness. "They could have been hidden all this time," Sarah replied, her voice steady, though she couldn't contain the anger that was rising inside her. "But we can't leave him alone now. Max needs help now." Sarah stood up, determined not to let Max suffer any longer. She turned around, pulled out her phone, and began snapping pictures of Max's injuries. Each photo was a testament to the pain Max had been through. Each photo was a powerful indictment of those who had inflicted these injuries. This couldn't go on. "We have to call the police," Sarah said, her voice firm. "No one can hurt Max or any other animal." Max seemed to understand what Sarah was saying, and though he was still scared, his eyes became less panicked. Sarah was, perhaps, Max's only hope now, and she wouldn't give up. Max's condition. Sarah walked out of the room after taking pictures of Max's injuries. She could feel the tension in the air, and Paula's footsteps followed her, silent as a ghost. The atmosphere at the center was heavier than ever. This sense of inevitability seemed to permeate the space, stopping at the doors of the kennels that Sarah couldn't help but notice. The dogs inside were still barking loudly, but now their barking only added to her unease. "How long has Max been injured like this, Paula?" Sarah couldn't help but ask as they walked down the hallway. Her question rang out heavy, like a challenge to everything that was happening. Paula was silent for a moment before answering, her voice choked. "We don't know. Max has been here for over 6 months. He's always been sociable, happy. We didn't notice anything different until he was adopted this morning." "Why didn't we notice?" Sarah could hear the sadness and blame in Paula's voice. She knew she wasn't the one who did this, but the pain of an animal lover was also the pain of the rescuers. They had missed a vital sign, and now Max was suffering the consequences. When they reached the parking lot, Sarah looked at Paula again and made her decision. "Paula, I'm taking Max to the clinic right now. He needs immediate care. There's no room for delay." Paula nodded, but she couldn't hide the worry in her eyes. "I'll stay here and wait for news." "Do you? Do you think we can find out who did this?" Sarah looked at Paula firmly. "We will find out. I'll make sure of it." Sarah knew that her mission was not just to help Max. She had to protect all the other dogs in the area from any danger that might come. And to do that, she had to find out who was causing Max pain, to stop the chain of violence they were suffering. Sarah quickly put Max in the car and drove straight to the clinic. The drive seemed to last forever. During the entire trip, she kept looking in the rearview mirror, observing Max, even though he still hadn't completely relaxed. Max's whole body seemed to be cringing, his eyes never leaving the chair where Sarah sat, as if a part of him still couldn't believe the change. When she arrived at the clinic, Sarah was mentally prepared to perform some tests and further examinations on Max. She didn't want to simply treat the wound, but to understand the cause. She knew that to help Max fully recover, she needed to reach deep inside him. And she would do it. Sarah led Max into the examination room, and she could see the worried eyes of the other doctors as they realized his condition. She asked her colleagues to help check the old burns and wounds, as well as run blood tests to see if there were any signs of infection. Sarah's every move was very careful and persistent, but in her heart, the tension could not be easily relaxed. Another veterinarian, Dr. Bryan, approached Sarah with a serious look. "Sarah, this wound was not an accident. The burns on Max's body have been there for a long time. They are not the result of a sudden collision. They show signs of intentional injury. Sarah looked into Dr. Bryan's eyes, her heart clenched. She didn't want to believe what she was hearing, but the truth was undeniable. Max had been abused. We will do everything we can to help Max recover. But I need more time to determine exactly how much damage there is and if there are any other serious problems, Dr. Bryan continued. Sarah nodded. Thank you, Bryan. I know he will get the best care here. But inside Sarah, a simmering anger began to rise. She could not ignore these cruel actions. She could not let the person who had hurt Max continue to hurt anyone else. Max, his eyes wide and filled with fear, lay still on the examination table, seemingly without the strength to fight back. Sarah sat down next to him, gently stroking Max's matted fur, and whispered, "You'll be okay, Max. I won't let anyone hurt you again. We'll find the person who did this and get you to a safe place where you won't have to be afraid anymore." A sense of calm settled in, even though the situation was still dire. Sarah knew that her job was not just to heal Max physically, but to help him overcome his deep emotional wounds. This was just the beginning of a long battle. A battle that Sarah would not stop until Max and all other animals lived in a safe and loving world. Discovering wounds, the vet clinic was no longer as quiet as usual. The steady hum of machines, the bright lights reflecting off Max's matted fur, made her feel an unsettling sense of anxiety. Sarah sat beside Max as Dr. Bryan examined his injuries, his steady hands gently lifting each layer of fur, observing and taking notes in the file. Max did not react as strongly as other dogs when the vet examined his wounds. He just lay there, tired and motionless, his eyes devoid of the joy or energy Sarah had once witnessed. She looked into Max's eyes, feeling as if a layer of fog had covered her heart. Every wound, every mark on Max's body was a testament to the painful past he had endured. Dr. Bryan gently lifted a patch of fur on Max's shoulder, and a large burn was revealed, a mark of lingering damage. Sarah, these are not normal burns. These wounds look like they were done by hand. High heat may have been applied to his skin for a long time. Sarah looked at the burns on Max's body, feeling a fire of anger burning inside her. "No way," Sarah muttered. "Why would someone do this to a gentle dog like Max?" Dr. Bryan continued, but his voice was serious. "You can clearly see that the wounds have begun to heal. He must have suffered these burns for quite a long time, probably a week or two. If this is a sign of intentional abuse, we need to act quickly." Sarah could no longer hold back her emotions. She stood up, her hands shaking and clenching into fists. Her eyes were red. She looked at Max, trying to calm herself but unable to quell the anger that was burning in her chest. Max was a happy, energetic, playful dog. How could someone do this to him? "We need to call the police immediately. These burns were intentional, and I can't let whoever did this get away with it," Sarah said, her voice firm. Dr. Bryan looked at her and nodded. "I'll assist you as best I can. But first, we need to take care of these wounds. Deep burns like this can lead to infection if not treated properly." Sarah nodded, although her heart was still in turmoil. She couldn't wait any longer. She quickly contacted Paula to inform her of Max's condition and asked her to help notify the authorities. Although Sarah knew the investigation would be lengthy, she felt a heavy sense of responsibility. No one had the right to torture innocent creatures like Max, and she wouldn't let this go without justice. Meanwhile, Max lay still on the examination table, his eyes still open, but the light in them growing dimmer. Sarah couldn't imagine how much pain and fear he had gone through to become like this. She gently stroked Max's head, whispering to him, "We'll be okay, Max. I promise I won't let anyone hurt you again." Max let out a soft sigh, and for the first time since he had arrived, a small light flickered in his eyes. His tail, though weak and trembling, began to wag gently again. Sarah couldn't hold back her emotions anymore, tears falling silently. She knew that, even though Max was still scared, he was starting to feel the safety and love she brought. The doctor continued to do his work, gently cleaning the wounds and bandaging the burns to prevent infection. Sarah sat down next to Max, holding him in her arms, trying to soothe the fear that was engulfing Max. Even though she knew it wouldn't be easy, at least today, Sarah felt like she could protect Max, at least for this moment. Calling for justice the next day, Sarah arrived at the clinic early, unable to wait to continue working with Max. He was still in the intensive care unit, being closely monitored by the veterinary team. However, Sarah's anxiety was unbearable, especially as she kept thinking about what had happened to Max and the violence he had endured. She knew that every moment was important to help him recover, but she couldn't shake the anger that was rising. Max was still not completely stable. Although his physical condition had improved slightly, Max's mental state was still fragile. He still couldn't fully trust people, and whenever someone approached, his eyes filled with panic. Max used to be an energetic dog, always wagging his tail and barking happily, but now he was a shadow, timid and shy. He's still scared, Sarah sighed, looking at Max in his current state. She couldn't accept that, even though she knew that recovery would take time. However, it wasn't all doom and gloom. In the quiet moments with Max, she sensed a small change in his behavior. Although Max didn't wag his tail every time Sarah approached, he didn't seem as frightened as before. Perhaps a small sign of trust growing. Sarah decided that she wouldn't give up. She wouldn't let what Max had been through become a painful memory without justice. While Max rested, Sarah pulled out her phone and called Paula. She knew that continuing the investigation couldn't wait any longer. It had to be done immediately. "Paula, I need you to do something very important," Sarah said as she stroked Max's fur. "We need to call the police. We can't let the perpetrators get away. They need to be held accountable." "Yes, Sarah," Paula replied, her voice filled with determination. "I will. They won't get away. We will support you in every way possible." Sarah felt a little reassured knowing that Paula, who had been caring for Max all this time, was also on board. Together, they had been committed to the cause of saving abandoned dogs, and now they were faced with the cruel reality of what Max had endured. The police arrived at the clinic in the afternoon. Investigators, dressed in business suits, entered the clinic, one of them being Detective Adrian Blackwell, who had worked on many animal cruelty cases. They began gathering evidence, photographing Max's injuries, and writing up a detailed report. Sarah stood by, watching their every move, both hopeful and fearful. Detective Blackwell said nothing during the investigation, but Sarah sensed the professionalism and dedication in the way he went about his work. "We're going to get to the bottom of this," he said, looking at Max, his eyes filled with determination. "We're going to find out who hurt him." Sarah felt a gentle wave of hope wash over her at those words. At least she knew that Max wouldn't be abandoned again. Justice would be served. As the investigators left, Sarah sat with Max, feeling a little relieved. While she wasn't sure when the case would end, at least she knew that Max wouldn't have to live in fear forever. And more importantly, the abuser's atrocities wouldn't continue, now that everything was out in the open. "You'll be safe, Max. I promise I will never let anyone hurt you again," Sarah whispered to the dog, feeling a little more at peace when she saw Max's eyes, which seemed to have become less frightened. Although the investigation would take time, and there would inevitably be difficulties, Sarah knew that her patience and determination would help Max regain his safety and faith in humanity. To get justice, she would never stop fighting. She did the right thing by standing up for dogs like Max. She would continue to do so until the abusers were brought to justice. Care and recovery planning. After the investigation was over, the atmosphere in the clinic was still heavy. Although the police were still monitoring the case, Sarah knew that Max's recovery journey was the biggest battle they had to face at the moment. She couldn't wait any longer, and she couldn't let Max continue to live in fear and pain. Sarah decided that she would do everything she could to help Max regain his health, both physically and mentally. Sarah walked into the intensive care unit, where Max was lying on the bed. He was lying still, his eyes still open, but no longer excited or panicked like before. This scene, although showing signs of improvement, still made Sarah feel worried. She knew that recovery was not just about the physical injuries, but also about Max's emotions and psychology. He was not a dog with simple physical injuries, but he also carried deep fears. Max looked at Sarah as she entered, but this time there was no avoidance. He didn't cower like before, but just stared at her silently. It was the first sign of change. Sarah smiled softly and sat down next to Max's bed, reaching out to stroke his shaggy fur. "Hello, Max," Sarah whispered, her voice warm and loving. "I'll take care of you, it's okay." Max didn't move, but something in his eyes changed. He still looked at Sarah with a little reserve, but it wasn't the panic it had been. It was a sign of trust, albeit a fragile one. Sarah felt a little relieved, but she knew that this journey was only just beginning. She had to help Max overcome his deepest fears. Sarah spent time with Max every day, from morning until the clinic closed. She not only tended to Max's injuries, but also helped him get used to human interaction. Every day, she approached Max with a gentle, patient attitude, talking to him gently and without pressure. She knew that Max needed time, and she would not scare him again. In the early days, Max still did not dare to look at Sarah for too long, and every time she came close, he would shrink back a little. But Sarah was in no hurry. She continued to talk to him, play with him, and get him snacks to make him feel comfortable. Gradually, Max began to respond. One time, when Sarah sat down next to his bed and held out her hand, Max did not shrink back anymore. Instead, he gently touched her hand with his nose. That was an important step forward. When Max was a little stronger physically, Sarah decided to try some training methods to help him regain his confidence. She started with simple exercises like calling Max to sit and rewarding him with a small piece of cake. At first, Max was quite unfamiliar with these commands. He didn't understand Sarah's commands and just stood there, looking at her with suspicion. But Sarah persisted. She continued to praise Max every time he did something right, even if it was just a small step forward. She knew that she couldn't rush it, because Max needed time to learn to trust people again. A week passed, and Max began to respond more positively to commands. Every time Sarah said sit, Max slowly lowered himself down, even though he still didn't fully understand. But this step forward was a clear sign that Max was slowly regaining his confidence. "You're doing great, Max," Sarah said when Max sat down on command for the first time, a small smile on her lips. "You don't have to be afraid anymore. I'll be here to help you." She decided to take Max out every day, so he could start getting used to the world around him again. At first, Max seemed quite nervous, only daring to take small, cautious steps. But Sarah was in no hurry. She took him along a small path in the park, where there were not many people. The scenery, the gentle sounds of the wind, the chirping of birds, all seemed to help Max feel less anxious. After a few days, Max gradually began to walk further. He was no longer timid and walked slowly, but began to stretch, sniff the trees along the path, sometimes chasing the leaves blowing in the wind. These changes not only gave Sarah hope, but also made her realize that Max was not a dog who just needed to heal his wounds, but he was a creature who needed help to heal his soul. In the following days, Sarah began to plan to find a foster family for Max. She knew that Max needed a stable and loving family, where he could live without fear. She contacted animal adoption organizations, looking for families who had experience and loved animals. She wanted to make sure Max was placed in a place where he would be loved and protected forever. But even if the perfect foster family hadn't been found, Sarah was determined to continue helping Max recover. She knew that every day he was here was a day closer to becoming a happy, confident dog. She promised Max that no matter what happened, she would never abandon him, Uncle. Finding a new foster family after a few weeks of working hard with Max, Sarah felt that he was starting to settle down. His physical injuries were slowly healing, and his mental state was slowly regaining balance. He had learned to trust people more, although he still showed signs of anxiety at times. But with each step, Max became more confident. This made Sarah feel extremely happy, but also full of anxiety, because now she had to face a new challenge, finding a suitable foster family for Max. The question of a foster family had been haunting Sarah all these days. She knew that Max deserved a better life, but she also knew that even a small mistake in choosing a family could have serious consequences, especially for a dog like Max, who had experienced deep trauma. She could not take the risk. She wanted to find a family who would truly love Max and help him fully recover, not just physically, but mentally. With Paula's help, Sarah began contacting animal adoption organizations in the area. Every family she met was very loving, but Sarah wasn't looking for just the usual love. She needed a family who had experience with dogs who had been hurt and needed time to recover. She couldn't leave Max with anyone who might hurt him again. Day after day, Paula and Sarah met with many potential families. Some were very kind, but Sarah didn't feel sure they would be able to meet Max's special needs. She began to feel tired of the process. Every time she saw Max look at her with those hopeful eyes, her heart sank. He needed a permanent home, and she had to find the best one for him. Finally, a special family appeared. They were Lisa and Eric, a young couple who lived in a house with a large yard and had experience caring for traumatized dogs. When Sarah met them, she could immediately sense from their eyes that they not only loved animals, but were willing to devote their time and love to helping dogs with traumatic pasts. They talked about the dogs they had raised before, and they were always ready to face the challenges that a traumatized dog could bring. Sarah felt reassured, but still uncertain. She had to be sure that this family would be the best choice for Max. Can you give us time to prove that we can help Max? Lisa asked with a gentle smile, her eyes shining with sincerity. We really want to give him a safe home. Sarah looked at them, observing every detail of their eyes. She could see the love and commitment in their eyes. They didn't just want a dog, they wanted to help Max recover and live a happy life. Sarah felt that this was the family Max needed. Her worries gradually subsided, but Sarah still decided to check more closely. She wanted to know that everything would be okay, that Max would be cared for and loved forever. Sarah agreed to let Lisa and Eric see Max. She took them to the intensive care unit where Max was still resting. When Lisa and Eric first saw Max, Max just looked at them with a reserved look. He didn't come closer, but there was no sign of panic like before. Lisa sat down, not trying to approach Max right away, just sitting quietly, waiting. She called his name softly, not rushing, not forcing. She just wanted Max to feel safe. Max slowly stood up and approached them, his eyes filled with doubt, but no longer afraid. He sniffed Lisa's hand cautiously, then looked up at her, as if to make sure she was trustworthy. And then something magical happened. Max wagged his tail, gently touching Lisa as if to say, I'm ready. Sarah watched the scene, her heart filled with joy and hope. This was the moment she knew Max had found a truly loving family. She looked at Lisa and Eric, feeling the love and patience they had for Max. She knew this was the right choice. We will love Max like family, Eric said, his voice warm and determined. We promise to take care of him and help him through anything. Sarah nodded, relieved. I believe you can do it. Max deserves a happy life, and I know you will give it to him. So Max had finally found a family he would call home. Although Sarah would have to leave Max, she knew he would never have to fear or suffer again. He had found a safe place, a place where love and care would help him heal completely. Max's progress after Lisa and Eric adopted Max, Sarah felt a sense of relief. She no longer had to worry about Max's future. He would be loved and cared for as a member of the family. But even so, Sarah couldn't completely let go of her worries because she knew that Max's recovery journey would not be a straight line and that there would be many challenges ahead. Sarah kept in touch with Lisa and Eric to monitor Max's condition. As the first weeks passed, Max began to show clear signs of change. He was no longer the panicked and timid dog he had been in the rescue center. Instead, Max began to feel safer in his new home. His physical injuries had almost completely healed, but more importantly, Max's mental health was improving. Lisa and Eric were patient with Max, spending time each day helping him learn to trust people. Lisa, with her gentle and loving nature, always knew how to approach Max without forcing him. She would sit down with Max every day, feed him his favorite foods, and simply be there for him. Eric, with his patient and caring personality, always took time to play with Max, helping him reduce his stress and fear. They built a new routine for Max, starting with the smallest steps. We're going to be patient with him, Sarah, Lisa said in a phone call with Sarah over the weekend. Every day is a step forward. Max still has bad days, but he's starting to wag his tail when we get home, and that makes us really happy. Sarah heard the relief in Lisa's voice and felt a small joy rise inside her. Max was not only recovering physically, but he was also starting to open up. That was really important. One morning, Sarah decided to visit Max in his new home. When she arrived, she immediately sensed a different atmosphere. Max was playing in the garden, running around Eric, his tail wagging steadily, and there was no trace of fear in his demeanor. The sight filled Sarah with a sense of intense happiness. She stood and watched, unable to contain her smile as Max ran up to her and wagged his tail. Max, you've really changed, Sarah whispered, holding out her hand for him to sniff. Max licked her hand, a familiar action Sarah hadn't seen since he was in the rescue center. It was a clear sign that Max's fear of humans had disappeared, and trust was slowly being built up again. Hi, Sarah. Eric smiled and waved. Max is improving every day. He's very smart and quickly learned the rules of the house. He started playing with the toys, and even runs around the garden without worrying. Sarah felt a surge of happiness as she saw Max happy and free in the home he deserved. She knew that Max was taking a big step forward in his recovery journey. While there were times when Max was nervous around new situations, Sarah also noticed a change. He had learned to trust the people around him, and that was a big win. A week later, Sarah decided to take Max to the park with Lisa and Eric. This was a big challenge, as Max was still not completely comfortable with meeting strangers or other dogs. But Sarah felt that this was the next step in Max's recovery. When they got to the park, Max seemed a little nervous at first. He looked around, sniffed the air, and kept a safe distance from the other dogs. But Lisa and Eric kept encouraging him, making him feel safe. Gradually, Max began to approach a group of dogs playing nearby. One of them, another golden retriever, approached Max and began sniffing him. Max stood still, but showed no signs of being overly anxious. He just stood there, slowly exploring and sniffing with curiosity, as if learning to get used to a new world. "He's doing great," Lisa said, looking at Max with pride. "This is the first step, and I feel like Max is starting to perceive the world around him in a positive way." Sarah looked at Max, her heart filled with emotion. He had come a long way since those days of living in panic and fear. Now Max was not only a physically recovered dog, but also a strong creature, slowly finding his faith in life again. She felt proud of him and hoped that each day would bring even greater progress. That evening, as Sarah prepared to leave, Max ran up to her, wagging his tail happily. He licked Sarah's hand again, as if to thank her for bringing him to a new family where he no longer had to be afraid. "Thank you, Max," Sarah said, gently stroking his head. "You did great, and I'm so proud of you." Max responded by wagging his tail one last time before running back to Lisa and Eric. Sarah stood there, watching him with a satisfied smile. Max's journey from a frightened dog to a confident and happy companion was a testament to the love and patience humans can have for these adorable creatures. Max's transformation time flies, and Sarah can't believe that Max has been living with Lisa and Eric for over 2 months. He has made remarkable progress in his recovery, not only physically, but also mentally. Although Max is still wary of new situations, his old panic is gone. He has learned to trust people, to open up, and to realize that not everyone is a threat. As the days go by, Sarah receives good news from Lisa and Eric. They tell her about Max's progress, about the adorable things he does. Lisa texts Sarah every morning, saying that Max has started to run around happily in the yard, willing to play with people. He also no longer avoids other dogs when they go for walks in the park. Together with Eric, they gradually introduce Max to meet up with his dog friends, and Max has learned to play without feeling anxious or afraid. One day, while Sarah was sitting in the clinic reviewing patient records, she received a call from Lisa. Her voice was filled with excitement. "Sarah, I can't believe it. Max really surprised us today," Lisa said happily. Not only did he get acquainted with a group of dogs at the park, but he also approached a new friend without any fear. He started running around happily and playing with other dogs without being nervous. Sarah smiled, feeling joy welling up inside her. What Max had achieved was not just a physical recovery, but a complete change in the way he viewed the world around him. He was no longer the dog who cowered in fear, but it opened up to everything with confidence and joy. "I'm so proud of him," Sarah whispered. "He did so well." Max not only recovered, but he found himself again. It's amazing. The following weeks passed, and Max's progress continued. He began to enjoy longer walks, exploring the outside world. Lisa and Eric continued to be patient, but the change in Max's behavior was undeniable. He had become a happy dog, ready to join in outdoor adventures and laugh with new friends. One weekend morning, Sarah decided to visit Max and his new family. When she arrived, Max was playing with Lisa in the garden. He was running around, his legs strong and agile, his tail wagging constantly. When he saw Sarah, Max immediately ran over, wagging his tail vigorously and licking her hand as if to welcome an old friend. He was no longer hesitant like before, no longer showing signs of anxiety or fear. It was a completely different Max from the panicked dog Sarah had met in the rescue center. "Hello, Max. You're amazing," Sarah said, sitting down and hugging Max. His warmth and familiarity touched Sarah. She saw a strong, confident, and happy dog. Eric stood beside her, smiling at Sarah. Max has changed a lot. He is no longer the scared, traumatized dog. He is an important part of our family. Sarah looked at Max, feeling a surge of pride. The dog she had cared for and protected had now found a safe, loving home. He had a new family, a new life, and a chance to start over. Sarah couldn't think of anything better. Thank you, Sarah said, looking at Lisa and Eric. You did such a wonderful job with Max. He deserves all the love and care you've given him. Max lay down next to Sarah, looking at her with eyes full of gratitude and love. Sarah didn't need to say anything more, because she knew that Max had found a family that truly loved him, and that was all that mattered. As Sarah stood up to leave, Max ran over, wagging his tail and sniffing her hand. A feeling of peace and happiness washed over Sarah as she turned to look at Max one last time. She knew that Max's journey was over, but also the beginning of a new life filled with hope. Just the beginning. As Sarah left Lisa and Eric's home, she felt a strange sense of peace. Although her work in rescuing Max had ended, his presence, along with the long journey he had taken, was the beginning of a new chapter in the lives of Sarah, Max, and his new family. Max's story is not only a testament to the remarkable recovery of an abandoned dog, but also a reminder that love and patience can change everything. Sarah knew that Max would continue to make great strides in his new life. With each passing day, he would become stronger, more confident, and more loving. She also knew that this was not the end, but the beginning of a more fulfilling life for Max. He was no longer the scared, broken dog, but a loving, happy, and confident dog. Over the next few weeks, Sarah continued to receive positive news from Lisa and Eric. Max had fully settled into his new life, not only as a loyal family member, but also as an integral part of the community. Lisa and Eric took Max to the park every day, and he began playing with other dogs without any anxiety or fear. He even started attending pet meetups and became a much-loved new friend. One morning when Sarah visited, she saw Max playing with the neighborhood kids. He was running around, wagging his tail, and his eyes were bright with happiness, no longer showing any fear or loneliness. Max had truly found joy in life, and that made Sarah feel very fulfilled. Max is amazing, isn't he? Lisa smiled, sitting down next to Sarah. We can't imagine life without him. He brought so much joy and positive energy to our family. Sarah looked at Max, her heart filled with emotion. He had changed, not only because of what had happened in the past, but also because the people who loved him had given him a bright future. He not only saved his own life, but also brought joy to everyone around him. Sarah said with a warm smile. He truly deserved such a happy life. As time went on, Max continued to thrive, learn new things, and build strong relationships with those around him. Sarah stayed in regular contact with Lisa and Eric, following Max's progress. She knew that with each step Max took, the pieces of his recovery became more solid. She also knew that this journey was not just about Max, but also about the people who had accompanied him, who were willing to give love and patience to help him regain his faith in the world. Max's story was not just about the recovery of an abandoned dog, but also about patience, love, and sacrifice. It was a journey filled with challenges, but also memorable moments. Sarah felt lucky to be a part of it. She looked at Max, his eyes shining and his tail wagging, and knew that the hard days were behind him. Max had found a new family, a new life, and a promising future. Thank you, Max, Sarah whispered, looking into his eyes, for showing me that even though times are tough, things can change with love and faith. Max turned around and licked Sarah's hand, as if to thank her. A sense of peace spread through Sarah, and she knew that Max's journey was over. But it was also just a part of a larger story, a story of love, recovery, and the wonderful relationships that humans and animals can create. The story of Max, an abandoned dog, has shown us the power of love and patience. From a broken and scared dog, Max found salvation and began a miraculous journey of recovery, proving that every living thing deserves a second chance. This journey is not only about Max's transformation, but also a testament to the unconditional care and love of those around him. We hope Max's story will inspire you to love and help animals in need. If you feel touched and love this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to support our channel. Please share this video with your loved ones to spread the message of love and kindness to the community. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on the inspiring and meaningful videos we will bring in the future. Thank you for joining us and Max on this journey.